Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a series of really serious allegations against an individual named Michael Williamson, all detailed in a few different source documents. And what's fascinating here is how we're going to see a story build, starting from anonymous online comments and ending up in a formal legal battle.
So let's kick things off with the source that really seems to have lit the fuse on this whole public controversy: an anonymous and very emotional online comment. This quote, which sounds like a reaction to a book Williamson published, it just captures that raw anger right at the heart of this whole thing.
So this first source we're looking at, it's all about this really intense but kind of general condemnation. It doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty details or offer hard evidence, but what it does do is set this really emotional stage for all the more detailed claims that are about to come.
And wow, the language here is strong. The author just comes right out and calls Williamson a liar and a horrible human, basically saying he's not at all who he seems to be. And it wraps up with this really stark warning, right? It says Williamson is not safe and that, quote, society needs to be warned about him.
Okay, so that initial post is definitely powerful, but it's really just the tip of the iceberg, because the story shifts, and it shifts fast, from these big emotional claims to some very specific accusations about his credentials and even his public behavior.
All right, let's jump to our next source and see how this whole narrative starts to build with claims of outright fraud. This is where that vague anger we just saw, well, it starts to get a whole lot more specific. Yeah, when you put them side by side like this, you can really see how the story is evolving. So on one side, you've got that general watch out for this guy warning. And on the other, bam, the accusations get super concrete. Now, keep in mind, these are still unverified claims from an anonymous source online, but the nature of the claims has totally changed.
Okay, so the second comment, it basically alleges a complete fabrication of his whole professional life. The author's claiming he has no degrees, that he only went to an unaccredited college, and yet he's going around calling himself doctor. And then there's this really serious claim about him shaming rape victims on stage, and the comment just flat out labels his behavior as fraudulent. And here's the crucial turning point, right? These allegations don't just stay in the wild west of anonymous internet forums. They escalate. They find their way into a much more formal, much more serious context. Which brings us to our final and honestly most significant source.
So now we're looking at an excerpt from a 2012 legal complaint. And this complaint names Michael Williamson in a leadership role within an organization called the ICC. This completely changes the game.
Right. So just to be super clear, this isn't some anonymous post anymore. This is a formal legal document filed with a court. And it details this really harrowing series of alleged events involving a young woman who's called Salute in the document and what the organization's leadership allegedly did or didn't do.
Okay, this timeline is pulled straight from the legal text itself. Let's walk through it. First, it alleges that back in 2008, a 15-year-old girl named Salute reports some sexual activity, and the leadership, including Williamson, allegedly decides she's the one to blame. The complaint then alleges she was smeared, called a seductress. And then things get even worse. It alleges that in 2009, she was violently raped by another member at a church event and that the organization basically did nothing about it.
In this quote, this is pulled directly from that legal filing. The idea of describing a 15-year-old girl as a very powerful seductress, that's just a shocking phrase, and it really forms a central part of the whole grievance against the leadership and how they allegedly handled this situation.
Okay. This is super, super important to understand. What is a legal complaint? Think of it as the first shot in a lawsuit. It's the document from one side, the plaintiff, that lays out their story. It's their version of the facts and the legal reasons they think they have a case. But, and this is the key part, these are just allegations. They have not been proven in court. It's not a guilty verdict from a judge or jury. It's the starting line, not the finish line. All right, so let's just take a breath and recap. We've looked at three really different sources, right? We started with two anonymous posts, one filled with raw anger and the other with some very specific accusations. And we ended with a formal legal document detailing a deeply, deeply disturbing case.
You can see how each source adds another layer to this whole controversy.
This table does a great job of breaking it down for us. You can literally see the journey. We start with that first anonymous comment, general character attacks, really low verifiability. Then we move to the second comment, which has those specific claims about his credentials. You could potentially verify that, so it's a little higher. And then we land on the legal complaint. Its existence as a filed document is highly verifiable, even if the allegations inside it are, at this stage, still unproven.
So where does this all leave us? We've watched a story unfold through these completely different types of information. You've got anonymous comments from the depths of the internet, and then you have formal court records. This explainer has laid out what the sources allege, but the real takeaway here is about how we process this stuff. When you see these totally different forms of testimony collide, what questions should we be asking ourselves? How much weight do you give to an anonymous post versus a legal filing? And what does the path from a simple accusation to a proven fact actually look like?